This
The
farce
beta
ends
laughed
now.
as he rejected
By the
her,
authority
until the
granted to
Alpha
me
King
by the
marked
king,
her in
I
front of him.
strip you of your
The
title and
cold
command your
wind
immediate
whipped through the
arrest.
northern spires of the kingdom, carrying the sharp scent of frost and pine. Snow lay thick over the royal streets, muting the sound of footfalls and laughter alike. In the great hall of Castle Valura, candles flickered like tiny stars, casting long shadows over the marble floors and golden tapestries. Tonight the court was alive with murmurs, whispers, and glittering gowns, but one figure moved through the crowd with a quiet strength that drew attention without seeking it: Lady Alara. Alara's dark hair fell over her shoulders in waves, contrasting with the soft, pale gold of her dress. She moved with grace, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Nobles bowed and smiled, their intentions often hidden behind polite masks. She had learned long ago to read those masks, to see the ambitions and pride beneath them. But tonight her heart carried a different hope, a hope that would soon face scorn. Lord Kale, the beta of the kingdom, stood near the high table. He was handsome, charming, and arrogant, the sort of man whose laughter could fill the hall and whose opinion could make or break a career. Alara had admired him from afar for years, drawn not only to his beauty, but to the strength that seemed to radiate from him. Tonight she had summoned every ounce of courage to approach him, to seek his favor in a world where favor could mean survival. She drew herself up and approached Kale. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of her intentions. "Lord Kale," she said, bowing slightly, "I wish to speak with you about the northern trade routes. I have insights that may interest you." Kale's laugh echoed through the hall, smooth and dismissive. "Insights, Lady Alara." His dark eyes sparkled with amusement. "Do you truly think your small ideas can sway me? Perhaps you should stick to courtly dances and leave the serious matters to men of experience." The laughter that followed him was sharp, slicing through Alara's calm exterior like cold steel. The warmth she had carried with her since entering the hall seemed to drain away, leaving a hollow ache in her chest. Yet she did not falter. She held her head high, refusing to let him see the sting of his words. "Perhaps one day," she said softly, almost to herself, "you will see what I am capable of." Kale's smile widened, cruel in its ease. "Do try to remember this moment, my lady. The memory may amuse you on lonely nights." The whispers in the hall swelled, carrying his ridicule to every corner. Alara felt eyes upon her, some sympathetic, others curious, many amused. She turned away, moving toward the balcony where the cold night could embrace her without judgment. The blood moon hung low in the sky, casting its red glow over the snowy city. Its light seemed to stir something deep within her, a power she had barely understood until now. She did not notice the silent figure that had appeared at the entrance to the hall, watching her with eyes that seemed to pierce through the frost and into her very soul. King Valerian, the Alpha, moved with quiet authority, his presence commanding respect without a word. He was a man of shadows and storms, feared and revered in equal measure, and tonight his gaze rested entirely upon her. Alara did not know how long she had stood on the balcony before he approached, his steps silent against the cold stone. "Lady Alara," he said, his voice low and even, yet carrying a weight that made her shiver, "you seem troubled." I have only faced misunderstanding," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "The court is not always kind to those who wish to speak truth." Valerian's gaze softened slightly, though his face remained impassive. "Truth is often feared, Lady Alara, and courage is rarer than gold in these halls." Her heart beat faster, a strange warmth spreading through her despite the biting wind. "I have always tried to be brave," she said, "even when it is difficult." He nodded, stepping closer, his presence both commanding and protective. "Bravery is not measured by the words one speaks in the light of day, but by the choices one makes in the dark. And tonight you have made a choice." Before she could respond, Kale appeared again, his pride and arrogance etched into every line of his face. He had seen her talking with the Alpha, and his amusement had turned to something darker. "Ah," he said, his tone forced with control, "our clever little lady finds the Alpha's attention more intriguing than mine." The hall seemed to hold its breath. Ilara's stomach tightened, caught between fear and defiance. Kale's eyes burned with jealousy, though he tried to hide it behind a mask of polite indignation. Valerian's expression did not change, yet there was a subtle shift in the air around him. He extended a hand toward Ilara, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Ilara, step closer." The entire court watched as she did, every whisper carrying the weight of expectation, gossip, and anticipation. Kale's laughter had once filled her ears with scorn, but now it faltered. He did not laugh. He could not. With deliberate care, Valerian marked her hand with a sigil of crimson light, a symbol of the Alpha bond. It glowed briefly, faint, and yet undeniable, leaving a mark that could not be erased by time or ridicule. The act was simple, yet its significance rippled through the hall like thunder. Gasps filled the chamber. Courtiers and nobles alike stared, eyes wide with shock. The beta's face drained of color. Kale's pride, so carefully maintained, crumbled in an instant. The laughter that had once mocked her now died on his lips. Ilara stared at her hand, feeling a strange warmth pulse through her veins. The mark was not just a symbol of ownership, as some might think. It was a symbol of power, protection, and destiny. And in that moment she realized that her life would never be the same. Kale's voice, low and almost a whisper, broke through the stunned silence. You dare." Valerian's gaze met his, unflinching. "She is claimed, and no man's pride can undo that." The hall erupted into murmurs and speculation, but Ilara barely heard them. Her eyes were fixed on the Alpha, on the man who had seen her courage, even when the world laughed. She felt a strange connection, an unspoken bond that seemed to reach into her soul. Kale turned sharply, his anger barely contained. Ilara watched him go, the shadow of his disappointment trailing him like smoke. And in the same moment, a flicker of something unspoken passed between them, a tension that would not fade, a storm that had just begun to gather. Valerian's hand fell back to his side, his calm returning. Yet even in his composure, there was an intensity that made her heart race. "Come," he said, gesturing toward the balcony. "There is much you must learn and much that will soon demand your courage." Ilara followed him silently, her mind a whirl of fear, excitement, and something she could not yet name. The blood moon hung high, its red light casting long shadows over the snowy city. It seemed to whisper promises of power, of danger, and of love that could change the course of kingdoms. As they stood together on the balcony, looking down upon the quiet city below, Ilara realized that the night had changed everything. The laughter of the beta, the scorn of the court, the cold indifference of the world, it no longer mattered. She had been seen, she had been chosen, and the mark upon her hand was only the beginning. The wind howled through the spires, carrying the scent of snow and pine, carrying the first whispers of destiny. In the distance, wolves howled at the moon, their cries echoing like a song of power and warning. Ilara felt it in her bones. The night had awakened something within her, a spark that could not be extinguished. And far below, in the shadowed halls of the castle, Kale watched from the windows, his pride wounded, his heart stirred, and a dangerous thought forming in his mind. She is claimed, but at what cost? Ilara did not yet know the trials ahead. She did not know the struggles that awaited her, the challenges to her courage, or the powers that would awaken within her. But she did know this: she would not be the same again. And when the time came, she would stand not as a woman scorned, but as a force to be reckoned with by the beta who laughed, by the alpha who marked her, and by the world that had once underestimated her. The blood moon shone brighter, bathing the balcony in its crimson glow. It was a night of reckoning, a night of change, and a night where the first threads of a story of love, power, and destiny had been woven. and as the snow fell softly around her, Alara felt a tremor of anticipation. The game had begun, and she would not be a mere pawn. The Alpha King's gaze remained steady, unyielding, and full of unspoken promise. And in that moment, Lady Alara understood. Some bonds were forged not by choice, but by courage, by destiny, and by the fire that burned within. The cold of winter had deepened, settling over Castle Valora like a heavy blanket. Snow drifted along the streets outside, and the wind howled against the thick stone walls, carrying a sharp, almost bitter scent. Inside the castle, the warmth of fires and candlelight did little to ease the tension that hung in the air. Lady Alara moved quietly through the halls, her cloak brushing the marble floors, her mind still reeling from the events of the previous night. The mark of the Alpha King burned faintly on her hand. Every time she touched it, a warmth spread through her veins, subtle but undeniable, awakening something new within her. It was not merely a symbol, it was a spark of power, a connection that pulsed with life, demanding attention. She could feel it stirring even when the world around her was still. Kale had not spoken to her since the public marking, though his presence was impossible to ignore. He lingered in the corridors, his dark eyes following her movements like a shadow that would not be dismissed. Pride and jealousy warred within him, and though he tried to conceal his emotions with a mask of indifference, the tension was palpable. Alara's first steps were toward the northern gardens, where frost had painted the trees in silver and the air smelled of ice and pine. The courtyard was empty except for the crunch of snow beneath her boots. She needed a moment of solitude, a chance to gather her thoughts, to understand the strange power that had been awakened. "You should not be out here alone," a voice said behind her. It was calm, deep, and carried a weight that demanded attention. Alara turned to see King Valerian standing at the edge of the garden, his dark cloak blending with the shadows of the trees. I needed air," she admitted, her breath forming clouds in the cold night. "The hall, the court, it is too loud, too sharp tonight." Valerian's gaze softened slightly, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that made her shiver. "The mark you bear is not simply a symbol of bond. It carries responsibility, power, and danger. You must learn to understand it before it overwhelms you." Alara nodded, uncertain of how to respond. She felt both awe and fear in the presence of the Alpha, a strange mixture that left her heart racing. I will try," she said. "I do not know how yet, but I will try." He stepped closer, the frost crunching beneath his boots. "Try, Lady Alara, is not enough. You must master what has been awakened. Otherwise it may consume you, or worse, others around you." Before she could answer, a sudden movement in the shadows caught her eye. Kale emerged, his dark cloak brushing against the snow. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a mixture of anger and fascination. "You think this changes everything." Kale's voice was low, controlled, but the underlying tension was undeniable. "The Alpha may mark you, but you are still the same woman who sought my favor yesterday." Alara's heart skipped a beat. "Kale," she began, unsure what to say. His presence was both frustrating and compelling. The tension between them was thick, a storm waiting to break. Valerian's gaze shifted to Kale, sharp and unyielding. "Step back, Lord Kale," he said, his voice carrying authority that demanded obedience. "She is under my protection." Kale's jaw tightened, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he lingered, his eyes never leaving Alara. There was a storm of emotion behind them, anger, jealousy, and something else, something he could not admit even to himself. Alara felt torn, her thoughts a swirl of confusion and fear. The Alpha King's presence was commanding, protective, and yet distant in ways that made her curious. Kale's anger and pride, though difficult to bear, sparked a strange thrill inside her. She realized with a sudden clarity that both men were bound to her life now, though in very different ways. "Kale," she said softly, trying to assert some control over the situation. You do not understand. This mark is not just about the court or power. It is something more, something I must learn. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. Perhaps, but you will learn, Lady Alara, that some bonds are more complicated than they seem, and some choices cannot be undone. The words sent a shiver down her spine. She turned away, needing the space to think. Valerian remained at her side, silent and calm, yet his presence was like a shield against the cold, the wind, and Kale's unspoken challenge. Over the next days, Alara began to explore the limits of the mark's power. Small sparks of magic responded to her touch, whispers of heat, light, and energy that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She discovered that the mark reacted to her emotions. Fear caused it to flare dangerously, while calm allowed it to settle like a warm glow. Valerian oversaw her training, a demanding and patient teacher. He guided her hands, corrected her posture, and tested her focus. "Do not let the magic control you," he warned one evening as snow fell outside the high windows of the training hall. "You must control it. Otherwise it will shape your choices for you, rather than your own will." Alara nodded, determination burning in her chest. She wanted to be strong, to understand the power within her, but it was not easy. Every failure, every surge of uncontrolled energy left her frustrated, exhausted, and fearful. And yet, there was a thrill to the challenge, a sense of destiny she could not ignore. Kale watched from the shadows more often than she realized. He could not deny the changes in her strength, her focus, her growing power. And yet, his pride clung to his anger, making him retreat when he wanted to approach, forcing him to admire from afar. The beta who once laughed at her now found himself silently challenged, his emotions tangled between envy and admiration. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, a messenger arrived at the castle gates. The city had been attacked. A band of rogue sorcerers had struck at the northern trade routes, spreading fear and chaos. Alara felt the mark on her hand pulse, a warning of the danger approaching. "You must come with me," Valerian said urgently. "The city needs us, and your strength may be needed. The bond between us, the mark, it will guide you." Alara's heart pounded. "I am ready," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear inside. "I will do what I must." Kale's eyes darkened as he stepped forward. "I will not let you face this alone," he said, though his tone was less confident than he intended. There was a flicker of humility in his words, a hint of respect that he could not yet express fully. Valerian gave him a sharp look but said nothing. Instead, he led Alara to the stables, where horses awaited them. The night was bitter, but they rode swiftly, the wind cutting against their faces, carrying the scent of snow, pine, and distant danger. The city was a chaos of shadows and fire when they arrived. Smoke curled into the night sky, and the cries of frightened citizens echoed through the streets. Alara felt the mark on her hand respond, warmth spreading like fire through her veins. She could sense the fear, the anger, the danger surrounding her. Valerian moved with precision, his command over the situation apparent. He directed guards, rescued citizens, and confronted the rogue sorcerers with a calm that belied the chaos. Alara followed, her hands glowing faintly as she learned to channel the magic awakened by the mark. Small bursts of energy repelled attackers, protected the innocent, and illuminated the darkness. Kale, despite his pride, fought beside her. He had no magic, but his skill with strategy, sword, and courage kept them alive. And though he refused to speak of it, his respect for Alara grew with every moment he witnessed her strength, her fearlessness, and her growing command over the mark. After hours of struggle, the rogue sorcerers were driven off, leaving behind only whispers of fear and defeat. Alara's hands shook from exhaustion, but the glow of the mark remained steady, a reminder of the bond she now carried. Valerian placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes meeting hers. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly, "and the bond, the mark, will grow with you. But remember, every choice you make has weight. Power is not simply a gift, it is a responsibility. Alara nodded, her chest heavy but her spirit alight. She had faced the danger, felt the fire of the mark, and discovered a courage within herself she had not known before. And yet her eyes fell on Kale, who stood at the edge of the street, silently watching, his expression unreadable but full of conflict. The city had been saved, but the tension between them all had not. Kale's anger, envy, and admiration simmered beneath the surface, a storm waiting for its moment. And the Alpha King's gaze lingered on Alara, protective, commanding, and unspoken in its intensity. As the blood moon rose once again, casting red light over the snow-covered city, Alara felt the stirrings of destiny. The mark burned faintly, a reminder that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely a noblewoman seeking favor. She was a force to be reckoned with, a bond between two powerful men, and a spark of magic that could shape the fate of the kingdom. And far in the shadows, Kale whispered to himself, a mixture of envy, admiration, and something he could not name. She is stronger than I imagined, and yet she belongs to him. The night was far from over. The mark pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding, warning, and promising trials yet to come. And Alara, for the first time, understood that the path ahead would test not only her courage, but the hearts of all who surrounded her. The storm of destiny had begun. The forest of Eldrath was a place of whispers and shadows. Ancient trees rose like dark towers, their branches tangled and thick, blocking most of the moonlight. Snow had fallen lightly over the forest floor, muffling footsteps and making the air crisp and cold. Lady Alara walked carefully, her cloak brushing the icy ground. The mark on her hand pulsed faintly, a warm reminder of the bond she carried with the Alpha King, King Valerian. Valerian moved beside her, his cloak blending with the night, his steps silent but purposeful. The forest had a reputation of being haunted, and those who entered often spoke of whispers in the wind and shadows that moved with intent. Yet Alara felt no fear with him nearby, only a sense of both awe and tension. His presence was commanding, protective, and full of unspoken promise. Kale followed a few steps behind. His dark eyes studied Alara, watching the way she moved, how she carried herself. Pride battled with curiosity in his gaze. He had tried to deny his fascination with her, but seeing her in motion, feeling the strength and energy radiating from her mark, made it impossible. And yet, he refused to let his feelings show. "The forest is alive," Valerian said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was steady even but carried a subtle warning. "It will test us, Alara. It will show us what we fear most about ourselves." Alara shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. I understand," she said. "I am ready to face whatever comes." Valerian's gaze softened slightly. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Alara. It is acting despite it." As they moved deeper into the forest, the shadows thickened. The snow crunched under their boots, and the only sounds were the wind through the trees and the distant howl of wolves. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared among the branches, shifting and flickering like fire. Alara instinctively held out her hand. The mark pulsed stronger, reacting to the magic in the forest. "This is why I brought you here," Valerian said. "The magic of Eldrath will awaken what you carry. You must learn to control it before it controls you." Alara nodded, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. She took a deep breath, reaching out with the energy inside her. A spark of warmth leapt from her hand, illuminating the trees for a brief moment. The glow reflected in Valerian's dark eyes, and he gave a small, approving nod. Kale stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. "Be careful, Alara. Power without control can burn everything it touches." She looked at him, surprised by the warning. "I know," she said, "but I must try." Hours passed as they moved through the forest. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on the mind. At times, Alara thought she saw figures moving between the trees, and her heart raced. Each time, the mark on her hand pulsed, a steady beat of warmth that reminded her of her strength. Finally, they reached a clearing where the snow was untouched and the moonlight streamed down through the branches. In the center stood a large stone altar, covered with frost and ancient runes. "This place is old," Valerian said, his voice deep and calm. "It has seen kings rise and fall. It has witnessed choices that shaped the world." He turned to her. "Here you will face your trial." Alara's pulse quickened. "Trial," she whispered. Valerian nodded. "The magic you carry will challenge you. It will show you your fears, your doubts, and the parts of yourself you hide even from yourself. You must face them and emerge stronger, or it will consume you." Kale's gaze softened as he stepped beside her. "I will not leave you," he said quietly, though his pride made him keep a distance. "Face it with me nearby if it helps." Alara looked at both men, her heart caught between them. She felt the tension, the unspoken bond with Valerian, and the quiet admiration, respect, and frustration that Kale carried. For a moment, she wondered how such complicated feelings could exist all at once. But there was no time to dwell. She stepped forward toward the altar. As she did, the shadows around the clearing shifted. The wind whispered, carrying voices, some gentle, some harsh. Images appeared in the snow before her eyes, visions of failure, of rejection, of loss. She saw herself alone, powerless and afraid. The mark on her hand flared with light, reacting to her fear. She gasped, feeling the warmth surge through her veins. It was as though the forest itself was alive, pressing against her, testing her, demanding that she face her own inner darkness. "Do not resist it," Valerian said. "Let it show you, but do not let it control you." Alara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She let the visions wash over her, acknowledging each one. The fear of rejection, the memory of Kale's laughter, the pressure of expectations, all of it. She let the warmth of the mark spread through her body, grounding her, reminding her of her courage. A sudden shadow emerged from the trees, a dark figure shaped like Kale but twisted and frightening. It moved toward her, a mirror of her fear and doubt, whispering that she could never be strong enough, that the mark would fail, that she would lose everything. Alara's heart raced, but she held her ground. "I am not afraid," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "I am stronger than my fears. I will not let them control me." The shadow lunged, and the mark flared brightly. A wave of light swept through the clearing, pushing the darkness back. The shadow hissed and dissipated, leaving only the snow and the quiet wind. Valerian stepped forward, his eyes intense. "You have done well, Alara. This is only the beginning, but you have faced the first trial. You are stronger than you know." Kale stepped closer, his expression a mixture of relief and admiration. I did not expect that," he admitted quietly. "You are stronger than I imagined." Alara looked at him, sensing the honesty behind his words. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I could not have done it without the bond, without the guidance." Valerian's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "The bond will grow, Alara, and it will challenge you in ways you cannot yet imagine, but you have taken the first step toward mastering it." The three of them remained in the clearing, the snow falling lightly around them, the forest quiet once more. Alara felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a new understanding of the challenges ahead. The magic of Eldrath had tested her, revealed her fears, and shown her strength she had not yet fully realized. As they prepared to leave, a faint rustling in the trees caught her attention. She turned, her heart pounding. Shadows moved in the distance, and a cold wind swept through the clearing. "The forest is not done with us," Valerian said quietly. "The trial has only begun. There are forces here that will seek to test not just your power, but your heart." Alara felt a shiver run through her, not from the cold but from anticipation. She realized that the journey ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand trust, patience, and the ability to face the darkest parts of herself. Kale's eyes met hers briefly, a silent promise in their depths. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "I will be here. Even if you do not want me to be." She nodded, unsure of what to say. His presence was a comfort, and yet the bond with Valerian tugged at her heart, deep and undeniable. The complexity of her feelings was a storm she had no time to untangle. As they moved deeper into the forest, the shadows thickened again. The trees seemed to lean closer, and the whispers of the wind grew louder. Elara felt the mark pulse, warm and insistent, a reminder of her strength and responsibility. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a creature of darkness, not fully human, not fully spirit. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its voice echoed in the clearing. "Only one can claim the power," it said, its tone both warning and tempting. "Choose or lose everything." Alara's breath caught. The forest had never been so still. The snow hung in the air like frozen stars, and the mark on her hand flared brighter, responding to the danger and her resolve. Valerian stepped forward, protective, commanding. "It cannot harm you while I am here. Stand firm, Elara." Kale drew closer as well, tension and concern written across his face. Though he had no magic, his presence was solid, grounding her, reminding her that she was not alone. Elara drew a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the mark, the strength within herself, and the bond that connected her to the Alpha King. "I will not be controlled by fear," she said firmly. "I will choose my own path." The creature hissed, circling them, but it could feel the strength emanating from her. Slowly, it faded into the shadows, leaving only silence and the cold light of the moon. Elara collapsed to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The trial had tested her courage, her heart, and her resolve. She had faced the darkness within herself and emerged stronger. Valerian knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers gently. "You have taken the first step," he said quietly, "but there are more challenges ahead. The bond will demand more from you, and the forest will not release its secrets easily." Kale remained standing nearby, his expression softer than before. "You are remarkable," he admitted, voice low. "I see now why he marked you. You are stronger than any of us expected." Elara looked at both men, feeling the weight of their words, the warmth of the bond, and the pull of her own destiny. The forest had tested her, the magic had guided her, and she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The blood moon shone above the trees, casting its crimson glow over the snow-covered clearing. The trial was far from over, but Elara knew one thing with certainty. She would face whatever came next, not as a frightened noblewoman, but as a force of courage, magic, and destiny. And in the shadows, both men realized that her journey had changed them as well. Kale's jealousy had softened into respect and admiration, while Valerian's bond with her deepened, unspoken but undeniable. The forest of Eldrath had tested them all, and its lessons were only beginning. The snow fell softly, the wind whispered through the branches, and Elara felt the first true spark of understanding. The trials ahead would be difficult, the choices impossible, and the bonds tested. But she was ready. The magic, the mark, and her own courage had prepared her for what was to come. And far in the distance, a shadow stirred, watching, waiting, as if the forest itself had more secrets to reveal. The next stage of her journey had begun. The storm had come to the northern citadel. Snow whipped across the high towers, bending the trees under its weight, and the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits. Inside the castle, the halls were lit with flickering torches, but the warmth of the fires could not calm the tension that gripped the kingdom. Lady Elara stood at the window of the highest tower, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. The mark on her hand glowed faintly, a reminder of the bond she bore with the Alpha King Valerian and the responsibility it carried. She turned as footsteps approached. Kale entered, his face drawn but determined. "The city is in chaos," he said, his voice low but firm. "The rogue sorcerers are gathering. They mean to challenge the throne." Elara nodded. "I can feel it," she said, the warmth of the mark pulsing through her veins. "They seek power, but they will find resistance." Kale's gaze softened, and for a brief moment his pride gave way to concern. "Be careful," he said quietly. You have strength, but you are not invincible." She smiled faintly, touched by his words. "I know, but I am not alone." At that moment, Valerian appeared behind her, his presence commanding yet protective. "The city's fate depends on more than strength," he said. "It depends on courage, wisdom, and choices that must be made without hesitation." Alara turned to face him. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging outside. "I will not fail." Valerian's dark eyes softened as he studied her. "The mark will guide you, but the power comes from within. Remember that." The three of them, Alara, Valerian, and Kale, prepared to descend into the city. The streets were filled with chaos, fires, frightened citizens, and rogue sorcerers spreading fear. Alara felt the pulse of the mark, sensing danger before it appeared. Her magic flared faintly, illuminating her path as she moved with purpose. Valerian led the charge, directing guards and citizens alike, his command clear and unyielding. Alara followed, her hands glowing faintly as she learned to channel the magic of the mark. Small bursts of energy protected the innocent, pushed back attackers, and lit the darkness like a beacon. Kale fought beside her, his skill with strategy and sword keeping them safe. Though he had no magic, his courage and precision were unmatched. And though he refused to admit it aloud, he was awed by her strength. The woman he had once scorned and laughed at now moved with authority, courage, and power that demanded respect. Hours passed in battle and strategy. Rogue sorcerers were driven off, some retreating into the shadows, others captured. The city began to calm, though the threat was far from gone. Ilara's hands trembled from exhaustion, but the glow of the mark remained steady, a symbol of her growing control. Valerian placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "You have done well, Ilara," he said quietly. "Your courage, your control, it has saved lives tonight." Ilara nodded, exhausted but proud. "It is because of the bond, the mark," she said. "It guides me, but the strength comes from within." Kale approached, his expression serious but softer than before. "You have changed," he said. "I see it now. You are stronger than any of us imagined." Alara looked at him, sensing the sincerity in his words. "Thank you, Kale," she said softly. "Your support, even when unspoken, has mattered." The three of them moved through the streets, the snow falling softly, the wind carrying whispers of both relief and warning. They reached the central plaza, where a large stone altar stood, surrounded by the citizens they had saved. The rogue sorcerers were gone, but the air still carried the tension of unfinished business. A figure emerged from the shadows, a leader of the rogue sorcerers cloaked in dark magic. His eyes glowed with a faint red light and his voice echoed like a command of the wind. "You think you have won," he hissed. "Power cannot be tamed, it cannot be bound." Alara stepped forward, the mark on her hand glowing brighter. "Power is not chaos," she said firmly. "It is responsibility, courage, and choice, and it will not harm the innocent." The rogue sorcerer raised his hands, and dark energy surged toward them. Valerian moved instantly, blocking the attack with a shield of magical force. Kale struck from the side, distracting the sorcerer, giving Alara the opening she needed. She lifted her hands, feeling the warmth of the mark surge through her. Energy flowed outward, a wave of light and warmth that met the dark magic head-on. The force was strong, and for a moment she felt the strain of control threatening to overwhelm her. "Focus," Valerian commanded, his voice steady and calm. "You can do this, Ilara. Trust yourself." Ilara took a deep breath, grounding herself in the strength she had discovered in Eldrath. She let the warmth of the mark fill her, steadying her, guiding her. With a surge of light, the dark magic shattered, dispersing into the night like smoke carried by the wind. The rogue sorcerer fell to his knees, defeated. The citizens cheered, and the snow seemed to glow faintly in the aftermath, as if the forest and city alike recognized the power she had mastered. Kale approached, offering a hand to help her steady herself. "You truly are remarkable," he said, his voice filled with awe and respect. I misjudged you. Alara looked at him, a soft smile on her face. We all have room to learn, she said, even the strongest of us. Valerian stepped forward, placing a hand over hers. The bond is not just a mark, he said quietly. It is a connection of trust, courage, and destiny. You have proven that you are ready to wield its power and to guide it wisely. Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride, relief, and something deeper she could not yet name. She had faced fear, danger, and doubt, and emerged stronger, more confident and aware of the responsibility she carried. Kale's expression softened, his pride giving way to humility. I see now, he said. The mark was not just a claim, it was a test, and you have passed. The three of them stood together in the snow, the city quieting around them. The storm had begun to fade, leaving a sky streaked with the soft pink of dawn. The blood moon had set, replaced by the rising sun that glimmered over the towers of the citadel. Alara looked at Valerian, the Alpha King who had marked her, guided her, and protected her. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, unspoken but undeniable. She felt the bond between them, strong and real, and understood the depth of what it meant. She turned to Kale, the beta who had once laughed at her, whose pride had been broken and rebuilt in the fires of respect and admiration. There was a quiet promise in his eyes, a recognition of her strength, and a respect that could not be ignored. The trials had changed them all. Kale had found humility and courage in the face of her strength. Valerian had allowed himself to connect, to protect, and to care. And Alara had discovered the power within herself, the magic, the mark, and the courage to face destiny without fear. As the sun rose, bathing the snow-covered city in gold and warmth, Alara felt a sense of completion, yet knew the journey was only beginning. The bond she carried, the power she had awakened, and the connections she shared with both men would shape the future of the kingdom, and the hearts of those involved in ways yet unknown. Valerian stepped closer, his hand brushing hers gently. The kingdom is safe for now, he said quietly. But remember, Alara, strength without wisdom can still falter. Continue to learn, to grow, and to guide the power you hold. Alara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the warmth of the bond. I will, she said firmly. I will not fail those who trust me. Kale stepped forward, his expression softened by the events of the night. And I will stand with you in whatever way is needed, he said, his voice steady. Not as a rival, but as an ally and as one who respects your strength. Alara looked at him, feeling the complexity of her emotions, the gratitude, respect, and the lingering tension between them. Thank you, Kale, she said softly. That means more than words can say. The three of them stood together, watching the sun rise over the towers, the snow glistening in its light. The city had survived, the rogue sorcerers were defeated, and the trials of the forest and the bond had proven their worth. Yet Alara knew that destiny was a winding path, full of challenges, choices, and trials that would test her courage and heart. The mark remained, a living symbol of power, responsibility, and connection. And with it, she was ready to face whatever the future held, guided by strength, magic, and the bonds she had forged. As the wind carried the last whispers of the storm away, Alara felt the spark of something new within her, a promise of courage, of love, and of a future she would shape with her own hands. The kingdom had been saved, but the story of bonds, courage, and destiny was far from over. And Lady Alara, marked by the Alpha King, respected by the Beta, and strengthened by trials, knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. The snow glistened, the sun shone, and the mark glowed faintly, a reminder of the power and the journey that lay ahead. The story had reached a moment of triumph, yet the threads of destiny would continue to weave, binding hearts, testing courage, and shaping a kingdom ready to embrace the light of its heroes.